Welcome to Sunday School. Open your Bibles to Colossians chapter 3, and we'll pick up our study that we left off last time where we had so many word studies. We're going to do that again in this chapter. Have some word studies that we have to deal with. Now, I want to pick up where I left off last time. Now, I know in your Sunday School quarterly, we are supposed to be starting at verse 12 or 13, but we're going to verse 18 maybe. Well, let me just look and I can tell you where we're supposed to start, at verse 18. We're going to start earlier than verse 18 because I must replace what we put out of our lives with what we put into our lives, because that's what Paul does in writing to the church at Colossae. Lie not one to another, verse 9. Verse 10, put on the new man. Put on the new man. Put on therefore, verse 12, as the elect of God, holy and beloved, here's what we are to put on. Number one, bowels of mercies. It was believed that this idea of the bowels was the center of the whole personality. Now we use the word heart as the center of the whole personality. But this bowels of compassion, the center, heartfelt mercy, tender mercy, sympathetic concern, compassion. That's what this word means. Now that's what we are to put on. When we put off all this other stuff, what do we put on? We don't just go vacant. We put on compassion. Kindness. Now, I can define kindness as simply the ability to be gentle. Kindness. I think also it has to do with friendly and friendliness. I'm told that most people come to a church because they've been invited by a friend. Now, if that's true, then we need to make friends, and we need to invite them to church and to the places we go as the people of God. So kindness. Humility. Don't equate humility with weakness. It is a recognition of a relationship that says, I must serve someone else. That's humility. And the thing about humility, once you say, I am humble, you're not. Humility must be recognized by others in you. You don't recognize it in yourself, or you do away with the humility. Now, some people talk about their humility. You cannot talk about your humility and remain humble. It just doesn't happen that way. So, this idea of recognition of a relationship. Number 4, meekness. This is an attitude of gentleness towards someone else. I love the word meekness, gentleness. God gives it as a result of submission, acceptance in life. Long suffering, suffering without retaliation. Suffering without retaliation. Now here's where a lot of us fail, is in patience and long suffering. We simply must endure until we have a happy, recognizable, happy situation. Then there is forbearing. Hold up on it. Put up with one another for a while. Just know that there are times that everything is not all right. Some things are wrong. And a person's life goes through cycles. Physical cycles, emotional cycles, There were times that I didn't know why my wife was crying. And I have to confess, there are times I didn't know why I was crying. But you get something on your mind. It gets into your heart. And you have that feeling. So be long-suffering. Don't rub people the wrong way. It was Vance Havner that said, he was preaching. After he got through preaching, a lady came up to him and said, "Dr. Havner, you rubbed my fur the wrong way." He said, "Well, that can be rearranged. Turn the cat around." Now what he was saying is, I'm not trying to offend you. I'm preaching the gospel, and if that's offensive, turn around and understand this idea of long-suffering and forbearing one another. The failure to put up with one another is one of the greatest causes of division within the church. I'll stop at that. Number 7, forgiveness, he goes on to say. Forgiveness. We are to forgive one another. Forgive one another, even as the Lord has forgiven us. And number 8 is love. This is the basic garment or the belt that holds everything else in place, is this matter of love. Without love, you will never practice compassion, kindness, humility, meekness, long-suffering, forbearing, forgiveness. Without love, it will never happen in your life. This is the crown. This is what binds us together. Above all else, this is the virtue. Though I speak with the tongues of men and of angels, and have not love, I am sounding brass or tinkling cymbal. I'm just making noise. But when I love someone, when I care, love is very patient and kind, never haughty nor selfish nor rude. It does not demand its own way. All of these things that go into making up this love that God has had for us. And then he says a very interesting thing. Let the word of Christ dwell in you richly in all wisdom, teaching and admonishing one another in psalms and in hymns. In psalms and in hymns. Now, I need to get to this next part because it deals with the relationship, probably the greatest relationship that we have on the space of planet Earth, and that is the relationship within the family. Now, let me just start off by saying I have some common things when I counsel young couples getting ready to be married. Now, I know that I don't go into all the depth and detail that probably needs to be done, but I counsel as much as I need to in dealing with them, getting them ready for marriage. And I say to them, there are some things that you must do if your marriage succeeds. This is family relations. It's whether it's with the children, husband and wife, parent to child, child to child. They work every time. Number 1, there has to be a complete commitment. You are my wife. There is no one else but you. In that relationship, you are my wife. I don't need anyone else. I don't want anyone else. You're the best thing that God ever gave me. You are my wife. Not, as a friend of mine used to say, this is the wife. No. Not the wife, my wife, my husband, my child, my sister, my brother. Very personal. Complete commitment. Number 2, clear communication. It is amazing sometimes when I think I have clearly communicated in the family, I've missed the mark entirely. I have to regroup and go back because they look at me, Dad, what do you mean by that? John, what do you mean by that? Clear communication. Make it clear. So complete commitment, clear communication, creative caring. How can I do something to help you in the midst of this situation? Creative caring. Now, lots of men have date nights, and that's a good thing. That's a good thing. I never did do it well, but that's a good thing. Make this wife the most important part of my life. Now, I did try to do that. There was never a time that I can remember that I ever put her down in the company of other people. Never. Never. Creative caring. Care for one another. It may be an insignificant thing to you, but it's not to her. It may be when your daughter has her first breakup with a boy and you just fluff it off as puppy love. Well, let me tell you, it's real to the puppy. So be careful. Creative caring. And the last, common courtesy. Now, I don't know about you, but I do know that I still like to open the door for my wife. I still like to pull out the chair. Even when we're at home, just the two of us eating, I still like to pull out the chair. Common courtesy. Whatever that entails. Just be courteous to one another. Don't always be jabbering to one another. Just be courteous. It goes a long way. So those 4 things, I would simply say to you, concentrate on them, and I believe it will help you. Complete commitment. You are the only one. Complete commitment. Clear communication, which is always a problem in family. Always a problem. Creative caring and common courtesy. Now he is going to get into this thing of the husband and the wife and the children. And I'm going to do the best I can with it, knowing fully well that I'm not going to convince everybody that what I'm saying is what the Scripture says. But it is. Now, I know that part of this that he's writing about has to do with culture. Wives had very little meaning, especially to the Greeks. Very little meaning. So when we know that and understand that, and we come to talk about this matter that is going to be first on the list. Now I'm going to flop them around. I'm going to talk about the husband's relationship first. Because if the husband can get his relationship right, I'm convinced the wife is not going to struggle nearly as much with her relationship to him. So he says to the husbands, "Husbands, love your wives and be not bitter against them." Now, if you would turn to the 5th chapter of the book of Ephesians, he enlarges on this a great deal. He says, "For the husband, so ought men to love their wives as their own bodies. He that loves his wife loves himself. For no man ever yet hated his flesh, but nourishes and cherishes it, even as the Lord the church. We are members of his body, of his flesh. For this cause a man should leave his father and mother, join to his wife, and they two shall be one. This is a great mystery. Now, I'm convinced if a husband will love his wife like Christ loved the church, submission will not be a problem when we understand it properly. Love. He's talking about the kind of love that we must have for each other because we are children of God. And husband and wife must learn to love. And the husband has the responsibility of setting the pattern. Love as Christ loved the church. How much did Christ love the church? He loved the church enough to die for it. When your wife knows that you would die for her, I am convinced she's not going to have much problem in the submission relationship. He says a second thing, don't be irritable all the time. This may be the besetting sin of the husband, this irritability. Don't let the little things get on your nerves. Eat the big frogs first. Don't sweat the small stuff. It'll soon be gone. Love your wives as Christ loved the church. Don't be irritable. Now let's go back and pick up the wife. He says to the wife, submit yourselves unto your own husband as it is fit in the Lord. Now let me make just some general comments about this idea of submission. It has nothing to do with the value of a person. Absolutely nothing. What does Christ ask you to do in relationship to him? Submit. When I submit to Christ, I elevate myself. I do not diminish myself. That's the number one thing we need to know. If we are in Christ, we submit and raise the level of our life. So this idea of submission, I think I could say that when Paul is discussing all of this, he's discussing duties and responsibilities, not the rights of the individual. The duties and responsibility toward the relationship. Now, he goes on to say, backing up to the 5th chapter of the book of Ephesians, he talks about the wife in submission to her husband as head. A.T. Robertson had an unusual comment. He said that's assuming that her husband has a head. He's just simply saying this is a mutual thing worked out in the relationship of the husband and the wife. There is nowhere in the Bible I can find where it says, wives, obey your husbands. Nowhere I can find. It may be there, but I haven't found it. And this idea of, it means be loyal to your husband in all things. Be loyal to him. It does not suggest an inferior womanhood, which is what we've been sold a bill of goods in the culture in which we live. It does not suggest inferior womanhood. We know that and understand that. And we also know that he's talking about family relationships. And this idea of the wife being subordinate or the wife being submissive is voluntary submission. Voluntary submission. The initiative has to be with the wife. The husband cannot demand it. He can expect it, but he can't demand it. It has to be voluntary. I'm telling you, you're going to get into the worst battle of your marriage when you demand that your wife be obedient to whatever you want done. I don't buy that, never have. In my own relationship, never have. I don't buy that obedience. You do what I tell you to do. If I tell you to jump, see how high you can do it. No, I don't buy that at all. Not in the least. It is a relationship of voluntary submission to each other. You see, the husband must submit also to his wife. Companionship is the major reason for marriage, not sex. It's companionship, letting the two become one. And that's the mystery, the two becoming one. I don't know when it happened with us. In the 65 years and 2 months we were married, I don't know how it happened to us or when it happened to us, but I know it happened to us. I know it happened to us. No question in my mind. We even got to the place we could finish each other's sentences. We would look at each other sometimes and say the same thing, ask the same question. I don't know when it happened, but I know it happened. And above all else, let the two become one. And that will be the best joy that your marriage has ever known, and the best time that your marriage will ever have. The action of the wife must be fitting and proper in the Lord. In the Lord. So, husbands, love your wives. Wives, submit to your husband. Submit to your husband. Now, the last thing is children, obey your parents. This is well-pleasing unto the Lord. And then he says to the fathers, provoke not your children to anger, lest they be discouraged. It involves obedience, and obedience is pleasing to God. A child should not be making the rules for the family. I don't care how cute they are or how smart they are. A family has rules, and those rules are set down by the parents. And the parents had better be sure they are together on the rules, especially when the children become more and more independent during the teenage years. Those are tough years at best. They're tough. Some go through it fine. But normally the teenage years are the tough years, and you'd better be sure you're together on what you're telling the children to do. Together on the family. I jotted down something, and I hadn't looked at it for a long time. But here's what I wanted for my family, and still want for my family, especially my children and their children and grandchildren. I want this for my family. One, I want them to love each other devotedly. This total commitment that I've been talking about, the total commitment of love, will solve the problems in the family relationship. So I want the home to be a place where love abounds. Secondly, I want my family to be in an environment that allows growth to come to everyone in the family. Child to child, child to parent, parent to parent. That becomes a place of growth. Now, we used to do a very simple little thing, and we didn't do it all the time. We did it quite a bit. One of the best things we did, we always tried to protect the evening meal, especially when I was pastor of a church. After I became executive director of Florida Baptist, all of our children were away from home. And so it wasn't necessary then. But when we would sit down at the evening table sometime around 6 o'clock, there were certain rules. None of our children's friends called from 6 to 7:30. That was family time. We were going to eat a meal, And then we would do a thing after we finished. I would say to one of the children, tell us about your day and what happened. And they would tell about the day and what happened. Then I'd go to the next child. I'd say to the next child, now you tell me what your sister said about her day, and then you tell me about your day. You can't tell me about your day until I know you've heard about her day. And we did that. It would take about 15 to 20 minutes. We'd talk about what kind of day we had. After we'd had prayer over the meal, had a wonderful meal, usually it was one of the best times of the day, was our family meal. And we protected that time. Now, I don't know how you protect time, but you ought to protect some time when your family's going to be together. And for us, the evening meal was the best time and the most likely time. And we use it as wisely as we knew how. So an environment to grow. And then I wanted to be in the family a sense of understanding. 5 people in our family, 5 different people in our family. And one child likes this and another child likes this. Have an understanding. They don't have to be like you. They may not like the same colors. They might not like the same clothing, the same hairstyle. Be understanding of each other. And then, I always wanted my children to know, in our family, there is a provision of faith. Not only faith in God, but faith in them. And until they broke that faith, I continued to operate. Now, if they broke that faith, we'd have a session about it, and we'd get back on the page. Make sure your children understand what you expect of them. And make sure, as husband and wife, as parents, that you agree on what you want them to understand about the family. And make the provision. I believed in my children. I believed in my wife. And when we do that, we have that confidence in them. We try to spur them on. That's the relationship God's looking for. We don't need to be arguing about submission. We need to be talking about love and compassion and understanding in the family. Well, I hope I've said something today that has helped you in your family relation. I would say to husbands, quite candidly, be careful about irritability. That may be the downfall of many husbands. I know you work hard. I know you work to support your family. But watch irritability. It can be a real problem. God bless you. Have a great day.